Okay, good morning and welcome to Arkansas First. I'm Kandi Cox, and right beside me in the seat is Clint Lancaster, and we just want to welcome you here today for our live stream here at the Capitol. Clint, we are almost at the end of this legislative session. Can you believe it?
I can believe it because I've seen some of the legislatures and they look so tired that I'm like, I don't know how you're functioning. Like, you could give these guys an IV with a coffee drip and it would not affect them.
That's right.
Like, they are tired. The session's been extended. We're in the home stretch. You recently filed bills. You're not seeing any serious bills getting filed. It's getting past that point.
Right.
So we're wrapping this up and we're coming in like to the final stretch. And so that's exciting. I'm ready for this I'm like, please just quit.
Right.
Just quit. Just stop. You can stop now.
I think we do need to take a reprieve and go look at the bills that have been filed and look at some of the things that have happened with this legislative session. I think we can agree that it has been quite a disappointment on many levels. There's been some great things, but there's also been some disappointing things that we've seen come through this legislative session. And they do need to take a little break and go, what the heck have we done here?
And I think there's I'm no longer a lobbyist. I'm no longer hanging out here at the Capitol. But I'm going to tell you what my view is, just for having done it in the past.
Sure.
This session started out with like fire, like we're going to get this, we're going to do it. And you had a lot of what I would consider to be flagrantly unconstitutional bills get passed.
Yes.
And then as time rolled on, though, you've seen committees start rolling that back. Jimmy Gazaway's committee rolled some back. You see some of the things like, for example, Representative Mindy McMinnville wanted to make it so 501Cs. If you're a 501C under the IRS code, either you're a charity or a social interest group, you could not contribute to a ballot question committee. You could not advocate for ballot advocacy. And so that was in the initial bill, but it came back as amended out of the committee, and that was gone. And so what we're seeing is maybe as the session has rolled on, the temperament for some of the unconstitutional fervor has been like tamped down.
Right.
And I think that's good. I mean, I like to see, I get it the same way, right? Every war starts off with a high morale in generally a high morale in the troops on the ground, but as it wears on, they kind of die down a little bit and they get into the ruts. And so the ruts here were good for the legislature because it tamped down some of the stuff they were doing.
Well, what I want to do is, we always invite our guests that are watching us live to please share our live stream, share it out there, help us get the word out, and also ask us questions in the comments section. We love to, communicate with you and answer your questions and see where we go with that, right?
If you have questions, I have answers. Now, they may not be right answers, but I have answers.
That's right. And I am trying to find our live stream here. I know that we are live. Ryan's telling me that we're live, but I am trying to locate the live stream here. I'm having a little bit of a hard time, but put your questions there. Say hello to us. Let us know where you're coming from, and we'll get to you eventually. I may have to get him over here and help me out, but Clint, what we want to start with, I think, is House Bill 1887.
Yes. So House Bill 1887, and there's a companion bill, House Bill 2001. So the Arkansas Supreme Court, in a case, I think it's called Waycaster or Waycase, says that administrative boards are held to the same standard as judges.
Right.
So what happens? Let's just take the Arkansas Tow Board, right? Who makes up the Arkansas Tow Board? For the vast majority of people, it's towing companies, right? So if I am Lancaster Towing, I am regulated by the Arkansas Tow Board. And the tow board is made up of other towing companies. Now, if I get in trouble, and you see this with the bail bond board too. I've dealt extensively with the bail bond board for J.E. Bonney and Bryce's, some of the best bail bond companies out there, but they're regulated by their competitors. Now, if I am alleged to have done something wrong, then my competitors are the ones who determine whether I should be punished. Now, if you think about it, if I am Lancaster Towing and you're Kandi Cox Towing and you're in charge of deciding if I'm in trouble and suspending my license to tow cars benefits Kandi Cox Towing, right? So there's a conflict there. And really what I feel like is the tow board has a good director. It has Paul Burnett. I've known Paul Burnett for many years. Tough cop, good cop, retired. His wife is Angel, another good cop that works for the state police, and she heads the crimes against children. But I like to think I'm the catalyst. Of course, I always like to think I'm the catalyst. But I always, in every single case, I ask the entire competitors to recuse. So if the tow board is made up, I'm going to say of 7 members, and 4 of them own tow companies or have an interest in tow companies, and they have to recuse, then they lack a quorum. They lack the ability to hold a hearing on my misconduct.
Right.
And so, of course, for my clients, can you imagine what crafty lawyer Clint does? Crafty lawyer Clint says, "Hey, you got to recuse," and so suddenly you're absent the quorum.
Right.
And so there is no ability for the state to regulate misconduct or alleged misconduct from licensees. And so what these 2 bills are going to do is if they pass, these 2 bills will change up the makeup of the tow board to make it to where I can't do that anymore. Now, as a lawyer who represents licensees before these administrative bodies, in the words of Ray Baxter from Benton, Arkansas, that's bad. That's bad for my client. Object is bad. But that is bad. I mean, but at the same time, it's hard for me to say that as a member of the people who pay taxes, who want regulation to stop misconduct, that's not bad. We do need to make up, and we need to change the makeup of boards all around. But the tow board, this specific bill will change the tow board to make it to where I can't do that.
And you mentioned 2 bills. What's the other bill that you're referring to?
There's HB 2001.
Okay.
They're companion bills. But what you see out of this is, so you get what I compare this. So if we're talking about snow cones, right?
Right.
Some people like pina colada snow cones. Some people like strawberry snow cones. But depending on the day and my mood, I might prefer strawberry over pina colada, or pina colada over strawberry. So what you see with HB 1887 and HB 2001 is you see that you have pina colada and strawberry. They have some nuances in there, but whichever one the legislature will choose, you get the same flavor or the same outcome, a snow cone, just a different flavor.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay. And so where do you see these bills going?
It's a late push.
Yeah.
It's a late push. And I mean, to come in this late into the session with these 2 bills, it's I consider it to be a Hail Mary. You have a lot of legislation still going through. You've got a ton of old bills that are getting amended and sent back to committee. You've got constitutional amendments still up. I mean, the legislature gets to refer 2 issues to the people on the ballot as amendments. And you have I'm going to guess, I'm guessing just off my estimate, you probably have 50 constitutional amendments that have been filed.
Right.
And you get 2 of those. And so a lot of them are bad, a lot of them aren't good, and some of them are great. But you're still seeing the committees work through that, and now you're putting on new legislation. You're going to see, so let me ask you, Kandi.
Okay.
If you are Kandi Cox Towing, and you are on the tow board, and I want to change the law to kick you off the tow board, are you going to go quietly into the night?
Right. No.
No, of course not. You're not going to go quietly in the night. You're going to throw a fit. We in the previous session, when I was a lobbyist, we were lobbying to change up the makeup of the bail bond board. And I mean, you're talking about having kittens. These people had kittens and puppies and snails and all kinds of stuff. They were having conniption fits. Don't kick me off the board. Even though lawyers like me can make you ineffectual, don't kick me off the board. I need my board seat.
Right.
So I do not expect the current makeup of the board to go quietly into the night. I see board members calling their legislatures. I see opposition. And what I would these are good bills. I mean, and it's a good bill, and I hate it that Kim Hammer is the Senate sponsor, because Kim and I see very differently these days.
Right.
But it's a bill with a good purpose in mind, and I would encourage anybody who has tried to do this, who wants to do this, to just keep coming back. Because as someone told me once when I was a lobbyist, they said, don't view this as a one-shot deal. View this as a continuation. It may take you 3 sessions. I was like, dude, that's like a long time. It's like, I don't have that kind of patience. He's like, well, you better get it, So keep coming back. That's what we'd say.
Keep coming back and work these late nights here. And
Yeah.
So, well, here's the next thing that I want to talk about is SB 376. And this is by Senator Alan Clark and Mary Bentley. And this is about putting transparency on the chopping block. This is an act to amend the Freedom of Information Act. We have seen FOIA. We've talked about FOIA a lot this session. And this bill redefines, right, what constitutes a public meeting.
Yes. So, FOIA, like, I don't know why the legislature keeps wanting to jack with FOIA, other than it inconveniences a lot of people who are elected officials or government bodies. But, what's in the Ken Starr, when the Baylor scandal happened and he was president of Baylor, he said nothing cures dysfunction or something like this than sunshine.
Right.
Sunshine is the best disinfectant. And that's been that, and so we should put our government work out there to disinfect it, just to keep it open and clear. What happens? I'm going to tell you what, we were talking, I was talking to Dave Ellswick earlier this morning, and we were talking about how inmates in the Arkansas Department of Corrections, you could pay somebody and they would come out and pave your driveway at a fraction of the cost. Right. So if that's happening and we have no ability to see that, we have no ability to root out corruption or no ability to understand how our government's functioning. And that's bad.
Right.
So what this bill wants to say is that 2 or more members discuss a matter. So if you're going to have basically a closed door, off the record discussion with another elected official or appointed official with the same body, you can't tell, right? You can't tell what their opinion is. So I can't come, if you, me, and Jennifer Lancaster are all on the same committee, right, and we're supposed to vote on something important, I can come to you and I'll be like, Kandi, what do you think about the color blue? And you'd be like, I don't like blue. And so I can't go to Jennifer and say, Kandi's against blue. Right. But I could say, hey, any other color but blue, what do you want?
Right.
So have we really had transparent government? If I am short stopping that, I don't think so. I'd rather just show up and hear what your thoughts are, elected officials. Like, for example, the quorum court in Saline County, when the Saline County Republican women did the library issue, it was refreshing to know that they hadn't got together in advance. They hadn't talked about what they were going to do, and we heard their opinions raw. Like, Josh Curtis, for example, was not, I don't think he was a fan of the library stuff, but he did not have a chance, in my opinion, to lobby other members of the quorum court. So I got to see his dissatisfaction on his face and know that I was seeing something in real time. In real time, right. Yeah.
Right. Well, and earlier, if our viewers will remember that SB 227 passed, and that has gone, the governor has not signed that yet, correct, on SB 227, and that keeps this from happening where 2 or more people are getting together and having that conversation, where this, in effect, does the opposite of that.
Yeah, it does. And so do keep in mind that Governor Sanders is not a fan of the Freedom of Information Act.
Right.
Okay, if you remember, and I wrote a Kitty Barf article on this.
Yes, you did.
When she called a special session under the guise of protecting the governor and her family. And I think the governor's kids they look like great kids. I hope they have the most normal life possible. I hope they have great things. I hope the Huckabee family becomes a political dynasty. I'd rather have a Huckabee dynasty than a Biden dynasty, right? Even though I'm not always a fan of Governor Huckabee Sanders, I'd rather prefer a Huckabee dynasty to a Biden dynasty. That being said, I have no problem protecting kids. Like, you know, when Jen and I were doing Hunter Biden's deposition, we had to hire personal security to cover our kids because we were just having a series of events that were very disturbing. And so there was a cop sitting, an off-duty cop in a uniform in a car sitting outside my house quite often during that time period. I get the need to protect your kids. I mean, that's a given.
Right.
What I don't get is when you say, I want to protect my family, oh, and let's get FOIA.
Right.
And that's what the special session was. And what the governor said at that time was the people just weren't ready yet. Well, I don't know that they'll ever be ready.
Right.
You know, rights taken are rights lost, right? And, you know, you never see the government give back rights. You know, they never, well, let's just take the income tax. We don't need income tax, but I don't see the governor cutting income tax.
Right.
I don't see the legislator cutting income tax.
Right.
Even though we have enough money to fund all kinds of options and things. My point is this. The governor has expressed that she's not a fan of FOIA. Okay, so I'm waiting to see which one she signs and what she does. I would not be surprised if the big slash at the throat of FOIA did not work. So instead of cutting its throat, it can die a slow death of several little pricks.
Right.
And that's what I see happening.
Right.
This is one of them.
Yes, and you can answer this question. If she signs SB 227, and then SB 376 passes, and she signs that, that's the one that really counts, right?
That is the one that counts. The later one really counts.
Yeah.
They'll be blended together if possible, but in this situation, it would say two members cannot get together and discuss, but if they do, right?
Right.
You know.
Right.
So essentially.
But if you do.
A death by 1,000 cuts, right?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, truly, this bill does not align with conservative values or principles, which we emphasize transparency. We're about constitutional liberty, accountability to the voter, and limited government intrusion behind closed doors. This bill weakens all of those values that we hold dear.
It does, and where the governor gets this is from the federal government. The federal FOIA is much more limited than state. And Arkansas has a very robust FOIA, where the federal government does not. For example, you can FOIA Kim Hammer if you want. Don't go FOIA people for the hell of it. That's not what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Don't annoy people. But if you have legitimate concerns about information, FOIA it.
Right.
But I tried to FOIA French Hill one time. This is how I found out. You know, I didn't bother to read the law. I just sent him a FOIA, and he sent me a nice letter back. It's like, Dear Clint, members of Congress are immune from FOIA. So, but here's one page of what I'm going to give you, right?
Here's your little bit of information.
Here's the page they gave me. Yeah. So yeah, that's the impetus is the federal government, which I don't believe the federal government functions nearly as good as Arkansas state government. So I don't know why we want to mimic that, but what I see is politicians are wanting to do. So what was his name? There was a Blake Johnson, Senator Blake Johnson, in the last session. I'll never forget, even the Democrats made a meme of this. Jennifer Lancaster goes up to testify in front of Blake Johnson's committee, a senator, and he says something to the effect of, behind closed doors, that's how we operate. That's how things get done. So don't you criticize that. And she was like, what? Yeah, I mean, that's not how it works.
Behind the closed doors, that's how we're going to get things done. You know, one of the things that I've noticed this morning, Clint, just kind of taking a break, is usually we've got a lot of noise going on downstairs, and this is when you know you're coming to the end of the legislative sessions. It's a little quiet around here in the rotunda this morning.
Yes, it is.
We don't have all the background noise and the hoopla and all of that this morning. So
you're right. Yeah, it's quiet. It's good. I like this a little bit better. You know, this is a good like a good like volume level for me so I
Right,
can concentrate.
right.
But we don't have children singing.
No, we don't
like
have any of
exhibits.
that this morning. It's a little quiet. I was just thinking about that as we're talking. I'm like, I don't have all the background noise where I feel like I'm yelling over
That's true.
this morning. So we do have some people that have joined us this morning. Your wife, Jennifer's joined us, and Cameron, and Laree Treese, and Kim and Mark Bourgeois. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Make sure to share and put your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to hear what our viewers' comments are about FOIA. We know, and we talk about FOIA, I think almost every week. We are talking about FOIA. We have written, a lot of our contributors have written articles on this, specifically you and Jimmy Cavan, and I believe Jack Sotolara has written articles on the FOIA issue, because it is so important to our conservative values and holding our government accountable. And so I'd love to hear what our viewers have to say about this. Lavita Jones says, I see another in the future for governor. I see a fast runner. Let's do it. MAGA, let's replace the rhinos.
Well, we should replace the Ryans, and that brings up a very good point, Kandi.
Yes.
I ran into a senator who I will not name this morning.
Right.
And that senator told me that though no one's reporting a prison funding bill yet, that there is a bill coming up that will get the votes and will have the votes to get off the floor. Mm-hmm. And that person told me that there was tongue lashings from the governor. Like the governor has used her authority and her power and her position to whip the legislature. Now, you've seen this in the past. Now, you saw this in the first session. Like in the first session, everyone was giddy over Governor Sanders.
Right.
And now that kind of giddiness has waned. You know, what's interesting to me about the way our government works is that the governor can make an executive decision. I want to build a prison in Franklin County, but I don't want to tell anybody until the deal's done.
Right.
Because once I sign a contract for it, the deal is done. But the pen is mightier than the sword. And so the pen comes from the legislature who writes that check.
Yeah.
Right? They write that check. And the legislature so far has refused to write that check. So what they've said is, Madam Governor, you can build as many prisons as you want. Good luck funding them.
Right. And that's on SB 354, right? And that failed, is that right? And that failed for the 5th time Tuesday.
That's correct. It has failed. It failed yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I think you said SB 633.
Yeah, SB 633 is the new one that it's just been filed, correct?
It has just been filed. It filed like maybe it's the 7th, so Monday.
Yeah.
And so as we wind down, so there's a cutoff, right? You can't file a bill the day before the session ends. I think it's like 10 days before the session ends is when the last cutoff for the bill. So you see a number of what lawyers would call a shotgun approach, right? A shotgun approach is where you make several different arguments, right? For example, say my dog bit you, right? That's your allegation. My first allegation is that my dog was in his house all day. My dog didn't get out of its house. The dog was in a kennel, all right? The dog doesn't bite. The dog has no teeth, right? And then, and if the dog did bite you, man, what did you do to my dog, right? So that's a shotgun approach. I got multiple arguments for why my dog did not bite you. And what you're seeing here is a shotgun approach on legislation. Let's appropriate this, pick your color. Look, I got a handful of snow cones. I got pina colada, I got strawberry, I got grape, I got tutti frutti, I got whatever flavor you want, just pick one.
Right,
you know? And so that's what we're seeing here. And SB 633, the talk around the hill is that one will get passed out of the Senate. And it's got basically, there's no line item appropriation, right? So it's not like we'll pay this much or this much. It gives a blank check. There were tongue lashings and threats made. There were talk about not getting jobs from the government if you didn't vote this way. And this is not uncommon. In one of the state committee meetings, the governor allegedly went into a closed session that the people of the party were not invited into. And they were told that if they do not vote for Joseph Wood for chair, she will find a candidate to run against them in the primary, and she will fund them through HuckPAC and endorse them. And they all voted right. So, you know.
They voted against me too, as first vice.
Well, yeah, you see how the party mechanism works. Like, the party is not really to enable the people; it's to enable the politicians,
right?
Who think that because they're elected, they get to decide what they're going to do for you. Well, welcome to America.
Well, we do have a few comments on here, and one of the things that I love is how your wife does not hold back when she wants to call you out on something, Clint. But she says, I do not hope the Huckabee family becomes a political dynasty. We should have higher standards. So she's letting you know that she is refuting that comment of yours. And then we would not know about the governor's $19,000 lectern if it wasn't for FOIA. And that's exactly correct. We would not know about that.
I mean, she's right. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that I want the Huckabee family to become a political dynasty. But if I had to choose between the Biden family dynasty and a Huckabee family dynasty, I'm going to choose the lesser of the two evils.
Right.
And so, but you know, in all situations, I defer to Jennifer Lancaster.
He's such a smart man.
Hey, you know, it's yes. It's not really intelligence so much as it's just common sense.
That's right. Kim and Mark Bourgeois, they said if Queen Sarah doesn't want it to happen, it won't happen. And they followed up that with, heard they would call a special session to get the prison funded.
I believe she would. If it doesn't get funded, I think she will. But I think if she has to call, so what we see out of this prison funding bill is the first real challenge to Sarah Sanders' political power. Right. There's a number. So it's not just like Brian King and a few of the others who have problems with this. It's kind of widespread. Like, you know, the governor comes up and she says in previous sessions, I want to do this. This is the plan. And then she blindsides. She absolutely blindsides the legislature with this new prison. And so the legislature has said, well, you blindsided me. Well, maybe we're not as good of friends as we thought we were.
Right.
You know, because you could have called us, you could have talked to us, you could have lobbied us, and instead you just told me, you know. I go back to something my dad always said, and I'm the same way. I hate being told what to do, even from Jennifer Lancaster.
Right.
I enjoy being asked what to do, but I hate being told what I have to do. And so, and I think you see that out of the legislature the same way. They hate being told what to do. They would have appreciated being asked what to do. And this would have been a situation where had it been properly vetted and run through there and it had the support of the legislature, this funding bill would have been passed early in the session, right? This wasn't some kind of surprise deal at the late session like some of these other bills. This has been in the works. And the fact that it keeps failing and it keeps failing and now it's gonna, you've got like a blank check appropriation is what I want. It's not blank, I mean, it's capped, but it's not line item. And so I think that shows that the legislature is pushing back, and Sarah Sanders, as the governor, is having to really whip up what she needs done.
Kim Baker, she chimed in. She says, so due to the the threats behind the scene and the persistence of the push from the main power, how do we fight for that?
Well, the only way you can really, and this is what the elected officials know, right? You can only fight for that at the polls, right? America, the way the U.S. system works is your referendum on your elected officials' behavior comes on election day, comes on primary day.
Right.
And so, and that's what they know is they believe that this conception that I can piss off X amount of people before I really have a problem.
Right.
Let's take Blanche Lincoln, Senator Blanche Lincoln, who was a Democratic senator back in the Democrat heyday, and she was pretty much blue dog, which is a conservative Democrat. But Obamacare came through, right? And Obamacare needed the votes.
Right.
And Blanche Lincoln was told that if you do not vote for Obamacare, we will not support you. We will not support you in your primary. We will not give you funding. And so what did Blanche Lincoln do? She had to make a choice, right? Either vote for Obamacare and piss off too many people,
Right.
right? Or not vote for it and not have a chair or a seat. So what you see is once you cross that threshold of how many people you make angry, right, that won't vote for you, then you have a problem. So our elected officials today know what that number is in their mind, right? You know, for example, in the Saline County Republican Committee, we often heard, you're the minority. The way you view is the minority. The majority of people don't feel that way. So what they're saying is, I'm willing to piss off you,
Right.
minority, instead of making the majority mad because they'll vote for me. And so that's what you see here. So your referendum on your elected officials' conduct comes at the polls. You know, you can, if you have enough money, right, you can fund an opponent, right? You can start a super PAC. I'm a treasurer for a couple super PACs, and this is the quote dark money, where I can go out and I can say, Kandi Cox, she's pro-life. If you think abortion is okay, then vote against Kandi Cox because she'll end abortion.
Right.
Right. And if that's the message I want to portray, I can pay to do that. But at the end of the day, if you don't have that kind of money and you don't have that kind of clout and you're in the minority, well, you're just angry.
Right, right. Levita Jones, she has made a couple comments. She said, I will donate to a fast runner in the future, Challenger, fast with energy. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is low energy, all caps there. I voted for her, dissatisfied. And she followed up with, exactly, Clint, elections are the solution.
They are, and it's hard. It's hard. First off, I mean, a lot of people who are the most qualified, and with the exception of Donald J. Trump, right, don't want the job, right? Why would you want to give up your billion-dollar empire and your days of playing golf to go put up with Congress and the media?
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
I mean, geez, that sounds like fun. You know, so the most qualified aren't always the ones who are going to run. Like, for example, can you imagine just if Warren Buffett had ran for president? Like, where would we be, right? You know, there's a lot of people who are like that, and that's why I voted for Donald Trump, is because he was. You know, when you don't have a connection and you're not dependent on political work for your future, then you have no one you're beholden to. But
Yeah.
it's so hard to find someone that's willing to do it. And, you know, I look at people like Keith Kellum, right? The Saline
Right.
County JP who got elected. You know, he's a guy who has the motivation and the desire to get good work done. And he's done a great job so far in his first term. But you don't see people like that want to come out and just like, hey, I want to make a positive difference. And if they do say they want to make a positive difference and their values are not behind that 100%, you should question every aspect of that. And so we go back to this Huckabee-Biden dialogue, you know, which evil do I want?
Right.
You know, which one can I live with? And so I really would prefer to live with none of them. And my wife is right. I should set a higher standard than the lesser evil. But, you know, these are what I'm given. You know, what I would prefer is that we have a Trump dynasty. We have a Trump dynasty where Donald J. Trump is the president, and then next, you know, maybe Laura Trump or Eric Trump runs for Senate, and then one day I look at Barron Trump and I'm like, that dude would make a good president. Just the way he looks. I don't know anything about his values.
He's got the stature of it.
Yeah, he does.
He walks in the room and he commands the room, doesn't he?
He does, and if he's got the values of his father, he's someone I would vote for. But I don't know that yet, and I have to evaluate that. I mean, if he came out and he's like, I'm for drowning newborn puppies, I'd be like, well, maybe not.
Levita also said 80 million is the majority. High energy, MAGA will turn out. And that reminds me of a couple, you know, just a couple comments and posts that I've seen out there on social media. I've seen from, you know, some of our people that are really involved with Arkansas First, is that we need to, our legislators really need to remember that we voted for the America First agenda, not the Republican ticket, but the MAGA America First agenda.
Yeah. Yeah, people do forget that. And it's what I don't understand, and I've said this a million times. I'm going to say it again in case you haven't heard it, right? So the Republican National Convention, its platform is for paper ballots. Mark my hand.
Yes.
Right? Its platform is for all these things that do not make up the values of Republican members of our legislature and sometimes even our Congress, right? So how is it you're running as a Republican when you're not backing the platform? And so I look at people like Kim Hammer who wants to stick with these machines with barcodes. And I'm like, well, how are you a Republican if you want to have barcodes when everybody else in the nation says we should have hand-marked paper ballots? And let me tell you something that's even more atrocious than that, right? And I'm going to call out the RNC on this. The RNC does nothing to enforce its platform. What you have Trump saying, Sarah, when are you going to do paper ballots? Oh, I'm working on it. Oh, you're not working on it. You're not working on it, because if you were working on it, it'd be just like this prison bill. It would be a done deal.
Yes.
So don't tell me you're working on it. Don't tell me you're working on it. But what is the RNC doing? Hey, let's kick out 200 MAGA Republicans out of the Saline County Committee. Let's bar a firebrand the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene for 20 years. What is the RNC doing over the RPA's action, the Republican Party of Arkansas's actions in this matter? Not jack crap.
Right.
Not a thing. Not a single thing. And so what is going on here is you have an overarching body on a national level that's toothless. It's a toothless tiger. Right. And I'll grab that tiger's tail every day because I know I'm not going to get bit.
Right.
You know, so I mean that's the atrocity, and the RNC has said we don't get involved in local disputes. And I'm like, well, hey, you should, right?
That's
if you expect the states to fall in line with the national agenda, you better get in line.
That's right.
So.
That's right. And we've talked about this before. We've hit on it just a couple weeks ago, that when you go to these committee meetings and you have legislators specifically around the time where they're, when they're running and they're campaigning, and you start asking them questions on what the platform stands for, and they don't even know. Like they don't even know what the platform stands for. They don't even know what the platform says.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me. They think the platform is them.
Yeah.
That's what they think. They think that they are the voice. And I heard it in a committee meeting. I said this a couple of weeks ago when I was on. I heard, of all people, Dan Sullivan say, well, the people voted for me, did they not? So what I say is what the people want. Well, how the hell do you get there?
Right.
Right? How does that logic work? I mean, that's like saying, I turned right on Broadway and it rained. So it rained because I turned right on Broadway.
Right.
I mean, that just makes no sense. And you cock your head and you kind of wonder about it. Yeah, no, there's a lot of disconnect there. And it's sad that at the national level where you really want to effectuate change. I mean, when I was in the Marines, right, the idea, the concept was that true values, true leadership flowed from the top down, from the generals down.
Right.
It didn't flow from the privates up, right?
Right.
So why are we expecting the states to flow up to the nationals instead of the national to flow down to the states?
Exactly.
But then again,
as in any good organization, the head is what sets the standards, and this is no different.
You're right. It is no different, and it's lacking.
Yeah.
And so it's really sad. And, it's George Washington years and years and years and years ago warned us of the danger of politics. And man, was he right.
Yeah, exactly. Kim says, so what she's experienced is MAGA supporters, Sanders, due to Trump supporters of her. When I speak on what I know, they deny what I say, because they are basing their view on just the support of Trump's words. Very true.
Yeah, I mean, let's take a look back when the primary season was going on and Trump was running for the primary, and people were like, oh, he won't get elected. He won't make it. You saw Tim Griffin, the current attorney general. You saw Sarah Sanders. You saw all these elected officials who were saying, I'm not going to make a stance just yet. I'm going to see how the primaries play out. Not me. I was like, Trump. I'm like, what? How could you say no? But they were, what you saw there was they were unwilling to take a stand on anything that resembled values. And anything that resembled values was dependent on popular opinion. And that's just the problem. That is the endemic of Arkansas politics.
Right. Well, Levita says that she's sending Laura Trump a message to have Jennifer on her show. That would be fun.
That would be fun. And I'll also, let's plug this. Jennifer is a fan of Laura Trump's athletic wear. So, Laura Trump has got this line of athletic wear. And if you go onto Facebook and you look at Jennifer's photos from Panama City, because we didn't just go to Panama City, Panama, just for the culture. We went down there because Jennifer did a half Ironman.
Yeah, because she's the woman, let me tell you.
I'm going to tell you what, she's like a machine. You just can't stop her with your hands, kind of thing. And so, but she actually, I'm going to brag on her just a little bit. Her 1.3 mile swim was 26 minutes.
Wow.
26 minutes.
Wow.
Now, so I was really impressed. But if you go to her Facebook page and you look at her photos, you will see her in some Laura Trump athletic wear. And she looks really good in it. So perhaps, Miss Levita, if you might mention that she looks really good in Laura Trump
athletic wear. Send a couple pictures of that. And Jennifer was agreeing with what Kim said on she's working to block it. Elaine Murray, she responded and said that when no never means no, like a petulant child, they just keep asking.
Yes, it reminds me of this time I was working for the Wisconsin Special Counsel, and I got on a plane in Dallas to fly to the Milwaukee area. And there was this kid, they rushed in from an international flight, and they were clearly so my role of parenting is like my Uncle John. He used to say no. And if you asked him a second time, he raised his eyebrows. He said no. And you did not ask a third time.
Right.
Okay? Now, that's my approach, and I have great kids, and that's a big testament to my wife's parenting, because she spends the majority of time with them. But I got on this plane, and this kid, they had rushed in from an international flight, and she's like, where's my iPad? And they were looking for it, and she's like, give me my iPad, screaming. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And she's like screaming, give me my iPad, give me my iPad. It's like, I'm sorry, sweetheart, left it on the other plane. Go get it, no, you dare. And I'm like, holy cow. Like, sometimes I feel like that's how this dynamic is here on the Hill in Arkansas. I'm like, give me my iPad. How about you just be grateful?
Yeah.
You grateful you got on a plane, you're going home, kid.
Yes.
Mommy, daddy's probably going to buy you another iPad because they lost yours. You don't have to throw a fit. I will say this. Thank God for noise-canceling headphones.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen to that. Well, let's see. Terry said that they are not letting it go for sure, referring back to the prison. Levita again says Donald Trump is just being nice to Sarah. He truly knows she's weak. She can't lead respectfully. And of course, Terry Wheeler says that Jennifer is always impressive.
Well, I know that. I'm going to tell you what, she's super impressive. Like, we got in, not last night, the night before, from Panama City, midnight. Jen gets to bed about 1. She's up and running at 7 a.m. I'm like, can we please sleep a little longer?
Hey, we got things to do.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know. Today she's probably going to bike like 10, 20 miles. Who knows what she's going to do. But she's got another half Ironman coming up, and so we've got that coming up. And then because never satisfied with being complacent, she has planned for us all to go on a mission trip to the Amazon this summer in late July. So she was like, do you want to go? I was like, I'll think about it. And then the next thing I know, I'm signed up.
By that evening, right? You were signed up. You've
like,
thought about it.
And she's going to say, well, you'll decide at the last minute and it'll cost more. But I hadn't decided yet. So, but it was decided for me. And I'm sure I'll have a good time. I mean, I've never been to Brazil, so.
That's going to be a fun trip.
It is.
It's going to be a hard trip.
There's a lot of flying. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we can talk about Panama and my experiences there and Costa Rica, but yeah, that's a lot of flying. And so I really think it would be advantageous if I could have Comfort Plus, at least.
Well, let's move on to Senate Bill 90. This is an act to require members of the public to be afforded the opportunity to present public comment at each meeting of a school district board of directors.
Well, this seems like a no-brainer to me.
Right.
This seems like a no-brainer. So what I would like to do is I would like to talk about Paul Childress for a second.
Okay.
Now, Paul Childress, before he was elected to the House of Representatives, was a school board member for the Benton School District.
Right.
And I remember distinctly one of these things that Jen had me help her with was there's a law that says that if someone provides a framed copy of the national motto, "In God We Trust," then it has to be put up in a classroom. And so somebody had provided enough to put all of the ones to the Benton school, every classroom in the Benton School District. But the Benton School Districts, the superintendent would not put them up because he believed it violated the separation clause of the U.S. Constitution. So we show up kind of relatively unannounced, and I'll remember it was Paul Childress and Jared Hambrick were the two that really stick out in my mind. But we were not on the agenda, but we got to speak, and because we got to speak, my conversation with the school district's board, the school board went like this. I understand that you're afraid that someone's going to sue you if you put up these national mottos, "In God We Trust." Well, I'm here to tell you that if you do not put them up, I'm going to sue you, right? And so, lo and behold, the superintendent got fired and the things went up, right? That's how important it is for school boards to hear the thoughts of the members of their community. I'm not the biggest fan of public education. In fact, my kids are homeschooled. I don't want my kids to go to, my kids are more advanced than your average fifth grader and third grader. So I don't want my kids to have to go be subjected to state-sponsored education. But if my kids were to be subject to state-sponsored education, I would want them to have the best education possible, and that involves my input. Even if you don't want to take my advice, you at least ought to listen to it.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Because when there is no discussion, there is no dialogue, there's never growth. There's never true growth if you're not accepting others' perspectives, right? Let's take religion, for example. If all you know is Christianity and you don't know anything about Islam and you don't know anything about Buddhism, then you don't truly appreciate why Christianity is so powerful.
Right.
Because, I was on the plane. I was watching a little bit of Life of Pi, a very good movie. And in that movie, the character Pi goes on a religious journey through all these different religions. He's Hindu, he's Christian, he's Muslim, and it's through all these things that he truly comes to know and understand what God is.
Right.
And so I can tell you what God is, or you can experience God.
Right.
And if you experience it, your life is going to be so much more enriched. And so when I was in undergrad, and there's a reason why in undergrad at colleges they make you go through so many of these other courses. Like I could care less about geology, but I learned a lot about rocks and minerals in geology that I still apply to this day. Like I can look at this floor and I can see that's marble, not quartz.
Right.
And I can see it's marble because I don't see any crystals in the quartz. All right, just little things like that. But in my early philosophy classes, there was Plato's allegory of the cave. All right, and so what this allegory is that there's a guy chained to a wall deep down in a cave, and there's a fire, and there's a guy down there going like this and making the shadows and saying, "This is an eagle. This is what an eagle looks like." He's going, "This is a dog. This is what a dog looks like." And so all the guy chained to the wall knows is what is portrayed in those shadows.
Right.
But then the man breaks free and he climbs up to the top of the cave and he steps out. And at first he's so blinded because he can't understand all the colors he's seen. But he now understands what the world looks like when his vision adjusts. And he looks up and he sees an eagle flying. And now he knows what an eagle really is. It's not this thing, a shadow on the wall. He sees it in all its splendor.
Right.
And he truly appreciates what the form of an eagle is. And that's the same thing about education and the lack of dialogue. When you have a lack of dialogue, you're like the guy chained to the cave. I don't want my kids chained in the cave. I want my kids to go to the top and see the eagle.
Right.
And maybe you, state-sponsored government, don't want my kids. Maybe you like my kids knowing that an eagle is something on the wall that looks like this. And maybe that's what you would be stuck with. But I should at least be able to tell you what an eagle really looks like.
Right.
So,
well, you mentioned about the national motto and what we went through with getting that into the schools in Benton. Interesting that you say that, because today what's been delivered to the governor is SB 433, and that is an act regarding the display of the national motto and the 10 Commandments in our public schools.
yeah, so, the 10 Commandments, I like it, right? I mean, 10 rules, what I like about the 10 Commandments is someone once asked Jesus, well, which one's the most important, right? Give me 2, right? And they're like, and so Jesus picked a certain number of commandments, and he gave it. If you don't know those, I suggest you read the Bible. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to encourage you to go explore the Bible for yourself.
That's what I tell my kids when they say, well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, let's why don't you look that up and do a report on it?
Yeah. Well, I bought my kids a dictionary, and then they just Googled it. And so, but I think that the 10 Commandments are some good, solid foundations. I worry that about the constitutionality of it. I mean, we have excess tax money. That doesn't mean we need to spend it defending lawsuits. But, I would be curious to see if this survives constitutional muster. I would have rather said here are 10 rules that must be displayed in every, because if you had 10 rules that said the same thing and they're not the commandments, then, you take the religious aspect out of it. But apparently the legislature and the governor can't be bothered with those kind of details. They'd rather just have things, get challenged and go from there.
Right. And Kim says, it's the foundation of our laws. And that's true. It is the foundation of our laws. And I'm thankful to see that. But yeah, when you speak of the constitutionality, because it has the commandments, which it goes, people want to go back to the religious aspect of it. When you can say, don't steal, it's illegal to steal. We should not be taken from one another. It bows very differently to say that than thou shalt not steal. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and so the 10 Commandments are you don't see, in my opinion, you don't see them in, I don't see them in Islam. I don't see them in Buddhism. I don't see them in Hinduism. The 10 Commandments are expressly theistic, meaning the God of theism, meaning God. They don't call God the same name in Islam or Hindu or Buddhism or any of these others. So when you have 10 Commandments, you're specifically invoking theism. And when you invoke theism, you start to, the question is the state sponsoring religion? And here's the other side. You can say, well, any religious doctrine can be posted. Okay, so we want the satanic doctrine posted on our schools? No.
Right.
No, you have that debate here on the Capitol because there was there is a 10 Commandments monument, and then the Satanists wanted to put a monument to Satan up.
Right.
And they're upset because they can't, and they're filing lawsuits. So at what point does it end in state-sponsored religion? Like you said, 10 Commandments, and I agree with our valued listener who says that's the foundation of a lot of our laws. You're right, it is. They serve as a bedrock. Then there's a question about, is the law just rules? Is the law morality? Is the law ethics? At the end of the day, it's a blend of all that stuff. It's informed by our morality, but they are rules, and the rules that accomplish a certain purpose. Thou shalt not steal is a rule based off our morality. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods or your wife or anything like that. That's not a law, but it's a good moral principle. And if you have good moral principles, you're not going to go around violating laws.
Right, right. So coming into the last part of this legislative session, what are some takeaways that you want to talk about as we end this time together?
Well, I'm glad to see that the legislature is reining in some of its more unconstitutional stuff. The damage has been done. It's really problematic how they behave. And what I've seen and what I've concluded is that the U.S. Congress has a House Oversight Committee. All right. And that is basically like, so every legislature has the power to do investigations, issue subpoenas, and determine if the laws they are passing are actually working like they thought they would.
Right.
Arkansas doesn't. That's House oversight, right? In the federal level. Arkansas doesn't have House oversight, but it has Joint Performance Review. And so the Joint Performance Review Committee is acting like an oversight committee to determine these factors. And what it's determined is not if it's functioning like they think it should be functioning, but it's how can I make it so it can't function the way it is functioning.
Right.
You know, and instead of saying, hey, I made laws and these laws are having this effect, what they're using it to do is say, I made laws and I want to stop them from using these laws. So how do I do that?
Right.
And you see a lot of this election legislation, a lot of it I'm really questioning whether it's constitutional. For example, to require that I read a ballot measure to the ballot title to somebody before they sign, right?
Right.
Okay, so now government, you're telling me what kind of speech I have to use in my political speech. And I get it. We go back to this thing, and you know, Kandi, I've harped on this. There's a preacher's wife in Warren, Arkansas, who was not intelligent enough to read what she was about to sign, right? Somebody at her local Piggly Wiggly, who she's never seen before, tells her that they would like her signature on a constitutional amendment for women's health. And dear old preacher's wife says, well, I've never seen you before, talking snake. So let me just sign, right?
Right.
And so because this person wasn't intelligent enough to read what she was about to sign, which our law says everybody is presumed to know what they sign, I now have to read a ballot measure. Well, so let's break that down just a little bit. You know, happy little liberal with her like purple hair. Nothing wrong with purple hair. I know some conservatives with purple hair, so maybe I should rephrase. With her green
I once
hair.
had purple hair. I had pink hair, Clint.
Okay. Well, one of the most conservative women I know has purple hair. So okay, let me rephrase. This
and a good friend of ours.
This happy little liberal with nose rings. Wait a minute. Don't
Let me go polish it real quick.
All right. Okay. Let's back up. Happy little liberal at the Piggly Wiggly wants to tell somebody that this constitutional amendment is about women's health. Okay. Is that free speech? Is that her right to come up and say what she thinks this amendment is about?
Right.
The answer to that, though I find it repugnant, is yes.
Yes.
It is yes. If you want to burn the American flag, that is free speech. That's freedom of expression. I don't like it, but I don't get to regulate it.
Right.
And so to regulate,
We don't like it, but we'll defend your right.
yes.
Yeah.
I always said, you know, when I was in the Marines, you can burn the flag, but I highly suggest you don't do it in my presence. You
Right.
know? And so what I tell people is this, right? If she wants to say it's about women's health and you want to say it's about pro-life, her right to say it's about women's health is equally as valuable to say it's your right about pro-life.
Right.
And so we should not regulate speech we do not like because it is a double-edged sword.
Yes.
And so for you to tell me that I now have to read a ballot title to somebody, you're telling me what my political speech is. And the U.S. Supreme Court has said that free speech is at its zenith. And if you don't know what the word zenith means, it means it's like highest, most advanced point. Free speech is at its zenith when it's political speech.
Right.
And so I don't think the legislature can regulate this kind of speech. I think it's unconstitutional. I can't fight every battle that's ever out there, though, you know, I'd like to fight this one because I think I'd win and I like winning. But I don't know that this is going to pass the constitutional muster.
Right. Right. That is, I think that's one of my biggest takeaways this legislative session is on something like that. We have talked about it multiple times through Arkansas First, where you're first you're going to be asking for an ID, right? And then you've got to read the ballot title. I'm personally not going to stand and listen to someone read a ballot title to me as if I am incompetent on my own to read and research, right? Because either I'm going to be stupid and just sign something like our dear lady in Warren, Arkansas, and just take you at your word, or I'm going to educate myself. That's on me.
Yeah, I agree. It is on you.
And so that's one of those things that came out of this legislative session that has just really, well, I don't like it. And it's been very disappointing. And you look at that whole slew of hammer bills that came out through this legislative session that has just been so unconstitutional.
Yeah, I mean, there was a fervor. And it was whipped up, and now the kind of fervor has died out. What I'll say is I've been pleasantly surprised at the number of legislators that I could communicate with who communicated back and intended to agree with my views, right? And so, you know, I tell people that if you want something to fail here at the legislature, call me. I'll go lobby for it to pass, and you're guaranteed to see it fail because that's how loved I am.
Right.
But for that kind of thing, when I'm like, hey man, this is really bad. Like I explained to one legislature like this prison bill, and I think we talked about this last time. But you know, there's a Democratic senator who wants to pass a bill to abolish prison slavery. So in the Arkansas Constitution, slavery is abolished except for those incarcerated in a prison. Slavery is legal. Okay, so what they're saying, and this comes out of Louisiana and the Angola prison, is that you're forcing inmates to do labor without compensation, right? Well, first off, I mean, one of the tenets of prison is punishment. Rehabilitation is another one, like deterrence is another one, but punishment. So, like, you know, you probably should be punished, but they want to pay prisoners to go out and grow their own food and all this other stuff. It's ridiculous. I think that I reached out to a legislature on a committee, and I said that legislator had expressed some confusion in a committee meeting about like, why are we doing this? So I explained, like, hey, $40,000 a year to house an inmate. Now you want to pay them to grow their own food, right? How much is that going to cost? So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good responses. It's been refreshing to see that there are still people who care for an opinion that may be unpopular, and it's also nice to see that the fervor has died down. When I see some of these legislatures, I mean, they look like zombies. Like I saw one today, and I'm like, oh man, is that dude alive? Yeah. So they're ready to go home.
We need to put a caffeine drip in their IVs.
Wouldn't affect them. Would not affect them.
Phyllis Ho, she's joined us on here today, and she responded to Jennifer and said, nor her trip to Disneyland in Paris. And Levita said, ethics need to return, even taught in high school. They need to be taught in high school. She also responded to Jennifer that she said, I'm sure as you, this is Phyllis, as well as everyone else, remember that Trump did not nominate her daddy for a cabinet post. I'm sure he had a good reason to pass on him.
I'm sure. I mean, it's also, you know, I'm not going to knock Mike Huckabee for ambassador to Israel. So I'm not a Mike Huckabee fan. He did threaten to slit my wife's tires once. It's a long story.
Oh,
well,
that's
you should ask Jennifer about it. She tells it better than I do. But I mean, look, we have a Southern Baptist
I think
minister.
she'll need to come on the podcast, and we need to talk about
You should.
that. Yeah.
You should. You definitely should. So, I mean, we have a Southern Baptist minister as the U.S. ambassador to Israel. And there is no closer friend, in my opinion, to the Israelites than Southern Baptist churchgoers, right? We believe that Israel is God's chosen people, that God has a special plan for them, that, you know, look, Hitler changed the Bible. He took out of the Bible that Jesus was a Jew. Jesus was a Jew. right? You have to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Jewish people I'm a Southern Baptist, they're close to my heart. Okay, so I think it's great that we have a Southern Baptist minister being an ambassador to Israel. Not the worst pick that's out there. By the way, Mr. Trump, if you have any time, I would like to be the U.S. ambassador to the Bahamas. So please keep me in mind.
Put you at the top of the list,
right.
right? Everyone write in to President Trump and say that we need Clint Lancaster as the ambassador to the Bahamas.
Because that's what I need, right? I need a U.S. compound in the Bahamas.
And no one would make fun of you wearing sandals all
That's
the time
right.
in
No.
the Bahamas.
Nope, I could be the first U.S. ambassador to wear sandals everywhere and the first U.S. ambassador in sandals to command a detachment of U.S. Marines.
There you go. There you go. We have Corey Wright said the first 3 commandments are no false gods, don't take God's name in vain, and keep the Sabbath day holy. How can you possibly remove the religious aspect from these? And do these impose upon non-Christians?
Well, that's a great question, actually. Let me pull up this real quick, and I will answer it.
So that's going back to us talking about the 10 Commandments being displayed in schools.
Yeah. How do you take the theistic aspect out of that? Okay. Bear with me on this. So I have my bachelor's degree is in philosophy, and one of my favorite classes was the philosophy of religion. And in the philosophy of religion, my professor, Andrew Eshelman, taught it this way. Don't think of God, because all these religions, whether you have Islam, whether you have Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, they all have a conception of what he called an ultimate sacred reality, right? An ultimate sacred reality. So my ultimate sacred reality is God, okay? For Islam, it's Allah, right? But whatever that is, you have this ultimate sacred reality, and having values in the ultimate sacred reality is what it matters. Like you should have an ultimate sacred reality, whatever that means to you, right? For me, that means the God of theism. To somebody at the Islamic temple, that may mean Allah. All right. Hinduism, I think, has 33,000 different gods, and it's a really weird concept where you have levels of gods and all this other stuff. Religious pluralism, which is the concept that all religions basically follow the same type of belief system, we just call it differently, which is not true. I believe that that's not accurate, but that's what the philosophy is. That's what the concept is. It compares those 33,000 different gods to angels with having a higher ultimate sacred reality. You could do away with the word God and just trade it out with ultimate sacred reality.
Right.
There's no reason why you can't do that. So I think it's possible to tweak it a little bit. Look, if I'm reading that and you shall have no other ultimate sacred reality before me. Right? Why do we? You can marginalize and nominalize that phrase, but when I read ultimate sacred reality, I know exactly what I'm thinking of. And if you are a Hinduist, right? You're a Hindu, then I think Krishna is their ultimate sacred reality. You could have that. You don't have to make it about theism to have these valuable set of rules. You shall not take the name of the ultimate sacred reality in vain, right? I think you could, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, right? Well, most religions have a Sabbath or a day off, right? I mean, that's part of their concept. You could change some of these phrases to make it to where they're not theistic, but universal. But for me, when I read them, they will always be theistic.
Right. But we have to go back to what our country was founded on, right? And it was founded on these principles, right?
Yep.
And so we go back to the foundation, and I think that to me is what's important, is we go back to what is the foundation of our country.
Yeah, we do go back to that. We go back to the found, and I think that in a nation where we do not endorse a religion,
Uh-huh.
but in a nation where we were founded on Christianity, we have to find a medium that allows for both to exist.
Right.
I'm not opposed to the Ten Commandments being in classrooms.
Right.
I'm not at all. I think it's a great idea. I'm not a fan of the coming lawsuits, right? I'm not a
Right.
fan of spending taxpayer dollars on defending that when I think it's going to lose, right? I mean, I like to pick fights I'm going to win. So I think that there's a way to do it, but the founding, our country was founded on Christian principles, and the more that we embrace those principles, the more prosperous a nation we will be. How do you do that in a nation with religious freedom and no state-sponsored religion? Well, that's been a question asked since the Constitution was drafted.
Right.
You know, and no solid answer has come.
Right.
So,
Well, Corey came back with, what should we teach the children how to interpret the meaning of false gods, and which real gods should schools be instructing our kids to stop taking their names in vain? And I think that that's what you're getting to with the theistic side of this, right?
So, I mean, I don't think schools, public schools, should be in the business of teaching about any God, right? I mean, that's something for you to do, like, there was a bill passed, and I think it got signed into law that said they're going to teach children that, like, Nazism and fascism is bad, or communism is bad, right? Communism is bad. Well, I don't have to teach my kids that Nazism is bad. If they don't understand that killing millions of Jews is bad, then I failed as a parent.
Right.
And the same thing is true about religion. I don't think that schools, state-sponsored education, should be in the business of teaching about God, because that's my job as a parent, and that's my pastor's role, right? I choose the church my child goes to, I choose what they're educated with, and I don't want the state being in that business. So I don't think the state should sponsor any or teach anything about that. But it's simple, right? I mean, if you have on the wall the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not take the name of your ultimate sacred reality in vain. Well, if you have a question about that, well, it's simple. What is your ultimate sacred reality? Well, it's Krishna. Well, you shouldn't take the name Krishna in vain, right? If it's God, you shouldn't take the name God. You don't have to teach so much as you have to ask questions sometimes. And you want
That's good.
And those kids need to. Here's the thing: one of the best arts of what we learned early in law school is, if you can convince somebody that it's their idea, they'll accept it, right? So as a lawyer, sometimes in front of juries, I want to convince them that it's their idea that this guy is innocent, right? And if I can do that, they'll embrace that, and I don't have to do nearly as much work in trying to convince people. But it comes to the asking questions part. I want my kids to come back and ask me questions. Hey, Dad, at the school they had ultimate sacred reality. Like, what does that mean? And I could be like, hey, what does that mean to you? What do you think it means? What is art? Where do we go to church? What do you believe in? You know, and if the parent wants to teach the kid that there is no ultimate sacred reality, then that's something that is told to the kid that the kid has not accepted. So the kid may ask questions later on. Very famously once, I represented a Satanist. And people were like, "Oh my gosh, how can you represent a Satanist?" And it's funny. A lawyer from the firm that does your adoptions for Abba referred this person to me, and they said they would not represent her because she was a Satanist, but go see Clint Lancaster because he'll represent anybody. And I talked to my wife about it, and I prayed about it, and I said, "Hey, Jen, God's telling me to represent this Satanist for free." And she was like, "You better pray again." And I prayed again, and it was still the same answer. So I represented her for free, but I had one requirement, that she come to church with me every Sunday while her case was open. And she had to bring her kid. And so she did. She was like, "Oh my gosh, God's going to light me on fire in the church." I was like, "No, Jesus loves you. You can sit next to my children." And so, and she did. And she came to church, and I had an opportunity to kick her case down the road and make her come longer, but I didn't. And so when you look back at that, those experiences, I didn't push Christianity on, I didn't push theism on her, but I just created an opportunity, an environment for her to ask questions, to her to have the ability to think about it, if she wanted to think about it. That's all I want these 10 Commandments to do. I want them to create opportunities to have thought processes without having constitutional challenges that are going to cost me a lot of money.
Right, right. Because Corey came back and said, it sounds like you're in favor of displaying the Ten Commandments as a way to virtual signal. Are you willing to alter God's word, which is a sin, to pursue this agenda? And I don't believe that that's what you're saying at all.
No. So I think that when Hitler changed the Bible to make Jesus not a Jew, and he also added some commandments, that's altering God's word. I'm not saying that we should alter God's word, okay? But at the same time, God's words are not permitted in a schoolroom. I mean, that's just that's the separation clause. And so I cannot put God's words into the classroom, but I can put those concepts, right? I can put the concepts of the Ten Commandments.
And I believe that that's what you're talking about, is the concepts, because that you believe that there's some constitutionality issues with this bill.
I do, and I appreciate your comments, Corey. I always enjoy a good dialogue. So I don't think that I'm not saying we should change. I'm saying that for the limited constraints and the constructs we have, if we cannot use the words, we should use the concepts. And those concepts should be thought-provoking. And so that's what I'm advocating for, is thought-provoking concepts based on theism that could also be interpreted other ways so that they don't offend the Constitution.
Right. Last thing on the talking about the Ten Commandments, and we'll move on. But Kim stated that the Ten Commandments also is a base that you have a choice. Just because it's posted, you still have a choice to follow them. If you don't, which is the basis of God's word, right? Is He gives us free will. If you don't, the consequences then fall on you personally. The moral base of it is pure and true, whether you believe it or not.
I mean, it is true, and it is pure. And what I love about Christianity is a lot of these Ten Commandments, I'm really good at keeping, right? Number 3, don't take the name of your Lord in vain. I'm not always the best at that, and I get reminded of that often from my wife and children. But the thing about Christianity is I get forgiveness, I get grace, and so Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which there's a documentary about his life out there, and it's very insightful. He had this concept of what he called cheap grace. And you get cheap grace as a Christian, right?
Right.
So cheap grace means like, oh, I know this is a sin, but I'll do it anyways, and I'll ask for forgiveness. Yeah, okay, so cheap grace. And Bonhoeffer was an advocate against cheap grace and an advocate for true grace, which is I tried my absolute best.
Right.
And I still failed because I'm human. And so I need the grace of God. So
yeah, that's right.
I mean, I think those are values that are within me, and I believe that if I do a good job as a Christian and my children are good Christians, they can go out into the community and they can, my little Gia, right, went to an art class one summer, and an art camp, and she's sitting next to this little girl, and this little girl goes, I'm a boy. And Gia goes, no, you're not. She goes, no, I'm a boy. She goes, no, you're not. And the little girl goes, I'm a boy. And she goes, no, you're not a boy.
Right.
And then the girl, I said, what happened? She got up and she walked off. I mean, but look at those values, right? She knew from her mother and I that she needed to stand firm on principles.
Right.
Black Lives Matter protests were going on. She walks into the bedroom, we're watching Fox News. There's some guy jumping on a police car and burning it. And you know what? She looked at him, she goes, what's he doing? I said, well, he's burning that police car. He must be a Democrat. I was like, yeah, darling, you're probably right. But those values that I instill in my children go out into the world.
Right.
And that's what the Bible says. Teach a child, raise a child in the way he should go, and he'll never stray, or she'll never stray. I think that's important, that it's my values as a parent, and it's my responsibility to teach my children. And I will always, my wife's greatest fear is that our children will not go to heaven. And she says that if our children don't make it to heaven, that is a failure on our part as parents. And she's 100% right. So I want my children to go out and be lights in the world, and that's what I teach them to do.
Right.
Stand on principle. And I think that if children are going out and they're reading 10 Commandments and they're asking questions and they're getting the concepts, we're going to be a better society. And we'll be a better society because we're still circling around to theism without saying the word God.
Right, right. Well, we're going to go back to the prison bill that you were talking about earlier about when we were talking about on the prison bill for the slavery issue. Kim said free food and board is payment. And she said if it's the case, talking about that bill, kids shouldn't contribute to their home because that's could be construed as slavery. My kids have thought that I have been slaving them all these years.
I'll tell you, Kim, I've explained to my children, America's a free country, but not until you turn 18.
That's right. That's right.
It ain't free. You ain't free, kid. Look, here's the thing about the Arkansas Department of Corrections, right? They're almost, and I believe last time I looked, so it's been a few years, but they're 100% self-sufficient, right? All the food that the inmates eat are grown by the prison system, right? All inmates can do some crafts if they want, but they have to grow their own food. They have to make cotton. They have to make all these other things, and that comes back in. Like I did. So I when I was in undergrad, I got to go in as a tour to Tucker and Tucker Max. Okay, I got to go in behind the scenes, go down all the stuff. Like it was part of an educational thing, and so I saw like how much eggs it takes to feed 300 inmates. You would be surprised.
Right.
You need a whole chicken house
Yeah.
for one prison. Right. I mean, the amount of food that it takes to feed these people is astounding, especially when you look at you got 1,000 inmates maybe in one prison. So it's really remarkable how much goes into it. And to think that the prison is self-sufficient. Can you imagine how much we would have to pay as a society to just buy the food to feed these people? I think they're lucky to get fed anyways, but hey, all right, no cruel and unusual punishment. But, no, they get time accredited if they're working and they're productive. There's a big theory out there that a lot of these people got into this trouble because they didn't have any life skills or jobs to begin with. So now they know how to grow something. They know how to work. They get instilled like some values. So prison is not supposed to be a resort. Prison is supposed to be uncomfortable. Now, it doesn't have to be like, you shouldn't be like, torturing people for the heck of it. But here's a fun fact. Corporal punishment is not illegal in prisons, right? So long as it's uniform.
Right.
You can't just beat the white people, right? You got to beat everybody equally.
Right.
So for the same offenses. Now, they don't engage in corporal punishment because apparently it's not productive for adults. I'm not sure it's really productive for my children either, but that's a whole nother story.
Well, Levita says that she can see the government turning prisons into 15-minute cities if we start paying them. No way.
Yeah, well, hey, I remember I was talking to Rodney Wright one day, the sheriff. I showed up at the jail to visit a client or something, and there was a broken window and a cinder block. And so I texted Rodney. I was like, dude, what's up with this broken window and the cinder block? He goes, well, it was really cold last night. I was like, yeah, I know. And it's like this woman showed up with a warrant, and she wanted us to arrest her so she could get warm and have something to eat. I was like, really? And he was like, we told her the jail was full. I was like, well, okay. He's like, so she picked up a cinder block and threw it through the window so we would arrest her. And we did. So, yeah, I mean, you already have people who want in, right? They want in. There are people who don't know how to live in mainstream society.
Yeah.
All right. All they know is an institutionalized life. One of my favorite movies is The Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah,
right?
great movie.
And you saw Morgan Freeman really try to adjust after an institutionalized life. And it's almost impossible. Like, you look at the West Memphis 3, which I ran into Jesse Baldwin when I was in Tucker Max on a tour, never been remanded to the custody of the state so far. So when they got out of prison, you had touchscreens.
Yeah.
You had like credit cards. You had cell phones. You would go buy food and you would, like, it was totally foreign to them. They had to learn an entire new way of life.
Right.
That the life just passed them by, and the technology and everything, it was so foreign to them. There are some people in this world that cannot handle that. They cannot handle the change, and they want to go back to what they know.
Right.
And what they were comfortable with. Because humans are creatures of habit, right? Most of us wake up about the same time. We kind of generally eat the same foods. We go to bed at the same time. I always brush my teeth at a certain point in the morning, and all this stuff. We're creatures of habit. And when you institutionalize somebody for 20 years and technology and life passes them by, then you suddenly throw them out into a very sensory environment, they can't handle it, right? And now, I'm not saying we need to spend tax dollars to help these people adjust, but there are just some people who want in the system already, and we don't need to make it easier for them to get in. Oh, not only do you get warm food, a place to sleep, relative protection, but now you get paid, right? You get paid to go to prison. Well,
yeah. And Kim was saying that doesn't include your medical, bedding, electricity, water, etc.
Yeah.
All of those things that it takes to run the prison system.
and yeah, the people, the guards, I mean, all that stuff.
And then Levita Jones said prisons utilize prisoners as great chefs too, and they can cook and each have their own qualities, which is very true. Corey chimed in and said it sounds like we are not better preparing them for life outside of prison and are focused on punishment and profiting off of them instead of taking more actions that could reduce recidivism.
Well, recidivism is a problem. And I mean, I get it. I mean, I get what you're saying, Corey, and I've thought about this myself, right? But you take so there are some people, those who want to succeed will succeed.
Yes.
Those who don't care or are apathetic to it will not. I can take electricity to a slug, but that ain't going to change the slug's speed of thought.
Right.
I'm just going to be shocking a slug. And so there are some people who, I'll say this, I believe that the majority of the population of the Arkansas Department of Corrections has a mental illness, like a personality disorder, that doesn't qualify for insanity, right? So where do we as a society put those people who are unable to conform their conduct to societal norms? We put them in prison. I got a cousin, right? He has a traumatic brain injury. When he was a kid, apparently he liked to play in the street or something. He got hit by a car, had a TBI. He can't conform his conduct. I mean, literally, like, I remember like prepping this guy. I was like, okay, when you go tell the judge, tell him you shouldn't go to DYS because you still have a chance. You want him to do it right. You know, this was a bad moment for you, and all these other things. And the judge asked him, okay, so tell me why I shouldn't send you to DYS. And the kid goes, oh, you should. You absolutely should. That's where I belong. Right. I mean, he gets it. I mean, he at least got that part. And there are some people who just can't conform. Like when he got out of DYS, he went and he broke into a camper, stole a 12-pack of beer, and set the camper on fire. Then he went and he sat on a picnic table at the park, drank the beer, and watched the camper burn. Right? Where do we put that guy who won't conform his conduct? I mean, he's my cousin. He ain't coming to my house. Right? You know, I don't want him. And so he has that type of place. I can't motivate that guy. Nobody can motivate that guy to do right. Now, I do see some people, and I worked on pardons from the governor back way in the day, where people did go to prison and they did make serious change. Like they truly accepted the products of their problems. I got a friend who was a drug addict and was in prison and all this other stuff, and today he's a very successful individual. Like, I mean, clean, God-fearing, goes to church, raises his kids right, happy wife, happy life. He was willing to make those changes. But if you're not, and all you know is how to lie, steal, and cheat, I mean, I don't have anything for you, man. I just don't.
Right, right. Levita said it would be great if a bill was written to address those who can't adjust to life after prison, same as vets.
Say that again?
Same as vets.
Oh, yeah. Well, we do have some vets. But, so here's the thing. Here's the big difference, right? I'm willing to support a veteran who goes overseas or goes somewhere and defends America, who defends my right to be free. I am unwilling to provide the same support to somebody who's stealing my chickens or stealing my Amazon packages or robbing my banks or beating up my kids, right? There's a big difference between supporting someone who carries the scars of America versus the scars of society.
Right.
Right.
That's exactly
and here's
right.
the thing, right? People say, oh, prison is terrible. And I mean, no one ever goes, oh, prison, how festive. Let me get an overnight bag, right? But, the military is not much different than a prison. I've been there. You get 3 hots. You get a place to sleep. They give you clothing. They actually pay you to be in the military. So why is it that these people, instead of making choices that put them in prison, because you don't just, it's not like you just go out and shoplift some bubble gum and go to prison, right?
Right.
You get multiple chances,
Right.
multiple chances. And so I'm all about supporting someone who would defend America and defend my freedom, but I'm not going to provide that same support to somebody who steals from me.
Right, right. That's exactly right. Terry Wheeler said, pay attention to what's called broadband. It's 15 minutes being installed. If you'll note, every neighborhood now has towers, even though they are known to be dangerous to humans and any living creatures.
Yeah, I mean, so that project was brought about by the feds. They funded, so I don't even want to say 5 or 6 years ago. I remember in my neighborhood, and I live off Highway 35, didn't have high-speed internet. Like, we were off a little, jetpack modem, right?
Right.
And so when fiber optics came, was like happy, joy, right? And so that project came about because the federal government said, we want to make sure, especially during COVID, that every kid has access to high-speed internet. And so I'm not a fan of broadband. I am a fan of high-speed internet. I don't know about it killing everything, but I do know that my wife likes to put, let's see if she put them on here. Nope. On my computer, she put these little stickers with some kind of device.
Oh, yeah.
So
that takes away some of that infra.
Yeah. And I don't know anything about it, but I know my wife wants it on my computer, so I'm very happy it's there.
Yes, because of the radiation. Yeah, absolutely.
She has it on her phone and on her iPad, the kids stuff. So I do believe that having radiation next to your ear is probably not the best thing.
Right. I was thinking about that the other day, especially, today is my son Corey's birthday.
That guy?
Yeah, that guy right over there. He even came up here with me. So, got up this morning early for his birthday, which I'm going to tell you, I'm really impressed because in our home, on your birthday, you get pancakes for breakfast.
Oh, really?
Dad makes pancakes for breakfast, but Dad said he's not making pancakes before 7 o'clock in the morning. So Corey's settling for pancakes tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So anyway, to come and hang with Mom today. So
that's very nice. How old is he?
19.
Wow.
I know. I can't even.
I
can't. All of my kids are growing up, and he's our baby. But anyways, he was asking for new headphones, and I think about that, like these kids constantly having these Bluetooth headphones on their ears, be it that's covering the whole ear or that's that just sticks in your ear. But I think all of that radiation going between the ears, your brain, and what that's doing. So
I worry about it too. But
yeah.
I like my AirPods Max that are over the ears, but I try to limit it, right? To phone calls, plane rides, 1923 episodes, Landman episodes, things like that.
Right.
What I do like about it, now I agree that the radiation's bad, but when you put on like your AirPods Max, it's like being in a theater with 3D sound. I mean, it's really prolific, but I don't want to be one of these people that constantly have an AirPod in my ear.
Right. And I love my beats now. I like to put them on and kind of get lost in my own world sometimes. But Kim was saying that, yeah, the radiation, but what are these stickers? So we'll need to get with Jennifer. I've seen those online, them talking about those stickers online, and I've seen where they have done the little probes to show what the radiation is with it and without it, and it's pretty remarkable. That's something we should probably, Kim, get together and order a bulk of. Terry was saying Jennifer is a smart lady, and yes, she is. But if you look into it, be detrimental to humans. Research is there. Even Kennedy has spoke on it some. A little research goes a long way. No Google, no Wikipedia.
Huh. Well, I'll have to look into it. And since you mentioned Kennedy, interestingly enough, I read where he is going to recommend that they do like fluoridation options, right? So,
right.
He's anti-fluoridation in the water, which in my opinion makes Senator Clint Penzo look like a genius.
Yes.
Because he ran those bills and they're still pending. And so it's so interesting how like local government and state government is just kind of behind like the mainstream sometimes. I think those special interest groups keep it going.
Right. I did a lot of research on the fluoridation of water. I've talked about it a lot here at the Capitol and on the podcast with that fluoridation. There is so much studies out there about what it does to babies in utero and the brain development of kids. Yeah. And so do that research. It's remarkable, and it will really open your eyes to the amount of fluoride that we consume that we really should not be consuming. In our house, we have no fluoride toothpaste because of that.
When I talked to you last night about my wife's Berkey water filter, so she's big on it, and I one thing, let me tell you this: there are two theories about how to successfully argue with Jennifer Lancaster. Neither one of them work.
I was going to say. Well, let's see, was it Levita? Okay, yeah, she said, Levita said up here, it's settled. Arkansas needs Clint and Jennifer. And, I just want to say, Levita, I am so thankful for Clint and Jennifer and the time and energy that they put into our state, and just what you all do for the people, and you do it because you know it's the right thing. And so I just want to thank you all for your service to our state and our community.
Well, thank you for saying that, and thank you, Kandi. Thank you, Levita. You should just thank Jennifer, because I do what she tells me to do, and I'm very happy to be active and helpful. I feel very fortunate that I have like some insight that about how state government and federal government work, and if we don't share that, we don't grow. Right? We don't grow as a base of people, as a society, as conservatives, as a grassroots movement. So ultimately, I would tell you this. This is a true story. I'm walking out of a courthouse in Morrilton, Arkansas, in 2020. And my wife says, "Hey, meet me at the airport. We're getting on a plane." I'm like, "Where are we going?" She goes, "Wisconsin." I'm like, "Why are we going to Wisconsin?" She's like, "I signed us up for the recount." And so I go to Wisconsin in November and stay through December, and all I brought was a couple of suits and a pair of wingtips. And so that's how I got my start in politics, right? Was in political and election law. Was my wife signed me up without asking me. And I went because I loved it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, how many days are we going to be there? Will we be home by Thanksgiving?" I get home like a week before Christmas, right? I'm like, I tell people it's the week I spent a month in Madison, Wisconsin. But
because that's where your residence was.
That's right. I was residing at the Spring Hill Inn and Suites in Madison, Wisconsin.
Your domicile was here, but your residence was there.
That's right. Maybe the Supreme Court will reset that case for oral argument soon. But, it's really, I credit Jennifer, because I would still be a lump on a log and happy to do what I'm doing. And she's really, as most wives are for husbands, she's kind of the force that says, "Hey, I I want our family to move in this direction. Like when I started the law firm, like my idea of like billing clients was basically, putting like billable notes into a jar, and when I needed money, I would empty it out and bill the clients. And Jim was like, "Yeah, you're fired." So I credit my wife with I credit my wife with a huge amount of my success, because I would not be where I am without her. So,
but she's a very wise woman, and she knows the abilities that her husband has, and that, you guys complement each other so well, and you've done so much for the state of Arkansas, and we are so grateful for the things that the Lancasters do for this state.
Well, thank you, Kandi, and thank you, Levita.
All right, well, I tell you what, we are wrapping it up. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, I had asked you about any final bills that you wanted to talk about. One that I was really glad to see that brought me back several legislative sessions ago, having an adoption agency that's a Christian adoption agency, is the fact that we want protections for religious liberty protections, right? Because as a Christian agency, we only work with Christian families, and we only work with husbands and wives, and we have to define a lot of those things. And so several legislation sessions back, we were working on legislation for protection for these liberties for private agencies, and it really got nowhere. But now it finally has. Representative Mary Bentley and Alan Clark worked on this, and so thankful for that bill. It's House Bill 1669. It's titled Keep Kids First Act, and it seeks to protect faith-based adoption and foster care providers from state discrimination when operating according to their sincerely held religious beliefs. Clint, that was so important to me, because I go back to our Anne Marie. When she was born, she had a lot of medical complications, and we were looking for a family for her. And so when you're looking for a family for a special needs situation, that often gets put all over the United States, and you start getting all of these calls, and we were getting a tremendous amount of calls that we were having to fill through. Well, we ended up being put under investigation through the state, because there was complaints that we were not accepting applications from those that were not Christians, right? And so I really had to fight through that, because as a private agency, as a private business, I can do business with whom I want. And so, and we had already established those in our policy and procedures, what types of families that we would accept. And so, we've had to, over the years, strengthen that and strengthen that and strengthen that. And so we know that as the world turns, we have to be on our toes on this. So I was really glad to see this come out. But it provides those protections, specifically concerning sexual orientation and gender identity.
Yeah, well, again, this goes back to my dialogue with Corey about the Ten Commandments, right? I don't want the government, telling me what my values need to be, right?
Right.
So, again, if my values are like, Gia, you're not a boy, you're a girl, right? She's just as free to have that thought in that statement as the little girl is to think she's a boy.
Right.
I don't want to regulate anybody, right? And in fact, I want to deregulate. And I find that the legislature they look for things to regulate, but this is a good conservative bill, because it says, hey, we will not regulate.
Right.
And I get it. I mean, you have a lot of special needs. I mean, my neighbor was Jimmy Servillo and Rachel Servillo.
Yeah.
And I know you'd place some kids there. And one of their kids, I believe, had fetal alcohol syndrome. And he was something.
Yeah.
But they got him lined out with medication, and there's no better environment for that boy to grow up, in my opinion, than with Jimmy and Rachel Servillo.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about salt of the earth Christians. His dad was a state rep, Jim Cervillo. And I remember seeing him at a Tusk Club gathering. And I'm like, man, your kid lives next to me with all like his like 9 or 10 kids. He's like, I was like, how do you keep up with their names? He's like, we don't.
They're all, yeah, they all Jays.
So, I mean, it is hard to find. I mean, if you have, hey, you got a baby with fetal alcohol syndrome, right? Or you got a baby that's addicted to a controlled substance when he or she is born. Like, very few people are going to jump up and down to take that kid.
Right.
And on top of that, finding you're invested as a Christian adoption agency, you're invested in the child's future.
Right.
Again, this goes back to what Jennifer said. If my kids don't make it to heaven, that's my greatest fear. That's my fault. Well, you as an investment into this child that you're placing also have that same responsibility. And that's a closely held value and belief, and one that you as an American should be able to further without being regulated by the government. So, I have a hard time always finding bills that I like, but this is one that I like.
Yeah, this is one near and dear to my heart, near and dear to our agency, and I was really glad to see that this bill has passed through. So it's headed to the governor's desk, I believe. So anyways, that's the last bill that I have for today that I wanted to talk about. Anything for you?
That's all the bills that I mean the legislative session is wrapping up. I'm looking forward to drafting more kitty barf articles. I just got back from Panama City, Panama with Jennifer. I'll tell you that we went on a number of tours and excursions. People have asked me, which do I prefer, Panama or Costa Rica? Costa Rica. All right, but in fairness to Panama, I was in the capital of Panama, where I was not in the capital of Costa Rica. So I'll probably go back to somewhere like Bocas del Toro, which is on the Caribbean side. But it's really interesting in that the U.S. operated the Canal Zone for so long, and no Panamanians were allowed in the Canal Zone, period. If you were a Panamanian, if you were not American, you couldn't go. And so there was a lot of bitterness there and that kind of stuff from Panama. But I didn't realize, as I really kind of dug into it, Theodore Roosevelt wanted the canal built, but Colombia owned Panama at the time. That was part of Colombia, and Colombia wouldn't approve it. So what did good old Teddy Roosevelt did? He did the American thing. He just took it from him. He sent a gunship down there to support some rebels. They broke free, and Panama became an independent country, which is why Panama has a constitutional republic form of government very similar to the U.S., and its economic system is based on the U.S. dollar. One Balboa is $1, and it never changes. And so that was really kind of interesting. I did not realize that, and then I also did not realize that the U.S. invaded Panama some years later in the 80s when Noriega came to power and refused to cede power. The U.S. invaded Panama and deposed him basically. And he was convicted in Miami federal court, spent time in federal prison Miami, was sent to France and spent time in prison. And then he went to this five-star prison in Panama City outside of the Gambo National Forest or National Park. It was just a really interesting kind of excursion to see. The people are a little more bitter and have more animosity towards Americans. Like there were people who initially would share like their water or stuff with non-Americans, but the Americans not, So it's fine, but it was a wonderful excursion, a wonderful trip. I'm looking forward to some more of it. Good food, good times. Just trying to catch up and get back on track.
Yeah, get back on track, because we've been gone a couple of weeks. We had spring break in there, and then you guys were gone, and I was sick, and we're glad to be back today, but we are wrapping up. Lavita, one of the things that I've loved is when we do these here at the Capitol Lives is the conversations that we get to have through our live stream, and we've had some great conversation today, and I appreciate everyone that has chimed in. Lavita said that she foresees a run in the future with long hair, Mr. Lancaster. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is low energy for real. I'm donating again to this news outlet. Great content. Glad I stayed with it all today. Sincerely thankful and impressed. I hope we see Jennifer on Laura Trump on Saturday soon. You make that happen for us. We would love to have that happen,
that would.
Levita. So,
and we appreciate you, Levita. We appreciate you and everybody else who's watching and commenting.
Yeah.
You know, I'm happy to answer. They may not be the right answers, but I'll give you an answer, right? But we appreciate our viewers. We appreciate, I appreciate you, Kandi. I appreciate everybody being here to support us. And happy birthday to Corey.
Yeah, happy birthday to my Corey today. And before we wrap it up, though, Clint, we have Constitution Camp coming up.
That's true.
And this is going to be June this year, June the 16th through the 20th. Registration is currently open. So get your kids registered. We also are looking for sponsors for the Constitution Camp, because we bring in this is our 5th year for Constitution Camp. It's in Little Rock, but we have kids that come from all over the state. I believe we even have some that have come in from out of state.
We have.
Before. And this year, of course, we made the surprise announcement about a week ago that our head speaker this year that we're really excited about is from the Tuttle twins, Mr. Connor Boyack.
Yep.
Right?
So if you've not read the Tuttle, so we started our kids on the Tuttle twins because, you know, it's their novels or stories for children, but they're based on like the principles that make America great, like economic freedom and things of that nature. So
right.
This is our 5th year. Now, I will say, it was so good that the governor sent her kids last year.
Uh-huh.
So Governor Sanders' kids attended. So it can't be bad if Sanders is sending her own kids, right?
That's right.
But we are. So it's held at Geyer Springs First Baptist Church. This was the creation of my wife, who wanted to teach. She was disappointed that there was not more activities to teach about American exceptionalism. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, I believe that America is exceptional. I believe America is exceptional because of our Christian heritage, our economy. We've just had so many opportunities and so many things that we've done so well. But you don't see that. You don't hear that. You hear the fluff parts that they want you to hear.
Right.
But this camp really delves into, like, what was the thought process behind the founding fathers? Like, so we wanted an idea of a Bill of Rights. Like, where did that come from, right? So this explores like Montesquieu and others that who really kind of laid the foundation before the founding of the United States, who our founding fathers looked to and said, well, if we could make something like Rome but better, how would we do that? And so you have these characters who dress up as Montesquieu and go into dialogues, and you have Hobbes as Leviathan, which is one of the theories of that process is he who has the biggest stick controls everything.
Right.
And like the bigger government gets, the bigger its stick gets. And so you kind of see how that process was limited and more of how we came to be. And there's crafts and there's things to do. Like kids get to make their own Declaration of Independence, and they get to sign it with a little stamp they make. And it's really good. It's held every year at Geyer Springs First Baptist Church. We're very grateful for Geyer to allow us to use their massive facility to host this thing. And so it's a good thing. We are looking for sponsors. Your sponsors help us. Sponsors help us pay for like crafts and the things that we need to help these kids have a great time. So please sign up. Please consider sponsoring. And if there's any questions you have, reach out to Jennifer.
Yeah, reach out to Jennifer. Speaking of Jennifer, she stated the governor did not send her kids. A prankster submitted the registration. So someone trying to do a prank, and Celine Hardliners has come on, and they said more kids need to know that. They aren't taught that. They just hear how bad we are. And the great thing about this Constitution Camp, it's high energy. Mm-hmm. It's the kids love it. As a matter of fact, we've had a kid go, best day ever, right? It's just a lot of high energy there, and they learn a lot through the interactions. And so get your kids signed up. Again, we are looking for sponsors because there's a lot of time. We have volunteers that come, but we put a lot of resources into making this camp happen, and we're so thankful for Jennifer bringing that.
Yep.
Well, that wraps up today's Arkansas First News Capitol live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in and staying engaged with what's happening in our great state. A big thank you, Clint, for joining me here as my co-host. And now here's your call to action. Make your voice heard. Stay informed and stay involved, and don't let the political establishment dictate your future. Get involved. Follow us on all of our social media platforms. And this is really important. Go to Arkansas First, that's arkansas1st.com, and subscribe so that you get our contributors' content. We have some contributors that put out some amazing content. So get on there, subscribe to our content, and don't forget to look for me on all of your podcasts with Arkansas First Reports. Thank you for joining us today, and until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay Arkansas strong.